Hey, hi y'all. I want to talk a little bit today about some stuff beyond what we talked about before. We've talked about not racial, race and ethnicity, and now I want to move beyond that. I think that you probably have a working knowledge of that, particularly if you're doing any reading as you're supposed to be doing in the class. So I want to leave that behind for now and move into something that is complicated, and it'll take me some time to explain it to you. It may require you to do a little outside reading on your own, which is a good thing, but I'll give you the basics here. Even the basics are somewhat complicated. We're going to be talking about two things, two new words for you, at least in terms of their use in developmental psychology. And those two words are normative, Normative, and non-normative, Nonnormative. Normative and non-normative. What is it? I'll tell you what it is. You have to understand that these are dealing with similarities and differences in development. The beginning of it is not too bad. It's in the moment it gets bad. As far as complication, don't let me scare you off. You're all in college now. You're big people. Normative influences, biological or environmental events that affect, this is going to sound weird, many of most people in a society in similar ways. Learning how to walk, learning how to talk, or environmental things that have an effect on you in the realm of normal. So keep that in mind. The timing, for example, of biological events. Biological events, what's a biological event? It's the formation of you in the womb, or learning how to walk, so on and so forth. Now, we break this down into two areas. Again, this is normative. Your cohort, we're talking age cohort here. A cohort defined as a group of people born about the same time. You can have all kind of cohorts. We're talking about age here because we're talking about development and that part of development. So your cohort is different from my cohort. I was born in 1948. Ooh, long time ago. 1948, many things took place in that time frame. I'm a baby boomer. So we came about after World War II. The service members were coming home and they were getting married and so on and so forth. So my cohort, my group, my age group, you have an age group, you have an age cohort. You're all about the same age. Then there's a historical generation. So we have a cohort, group of people born about the same time. Then we have this thing called a historical generation. This is different. This is a group of people strongly influenced by a major historical event during their formative period. Think a minute. How old were you when such and such a thing happened? Let's pick a thing. Let's pick 9/11. There were teenagers and even some preteens that were affected by 9/11. That would form a historical generation. A historical generation can have more than one cohort involved. So you're 16, 17, 18, 9/11 occurs, you go and join the military. That's what we're talking about, a group of people strongly influenced by a major historical event during their formative period. You're still forming. You'll be finished with the biological stuff by the time you're 25, but you'll still be changing because, as we said in the beginning, horizontal and vertical development is both, mostly horizontal. So it can be more than just one cohort. Now, that's normative. Let's look at non-normative influences. Non-normative influences. Unusual events that have a major impact on individual lives because they disturb the expected pattern of the life cycle. So, how about and we break those down to atypical and typical. So, an example, typical events that occur at an atypical time of life. You'll have to do your own research there because there are millions. Atypical event at any time in life. Let's say you are in an accident when you're little, so you don't learn to walk immediately, or some other thing is interrupting the developmental cycle or developmental process, excuse me. So typical events that occur at atypical times in life. Maybe you didn't learn to walk until you were 4. So these are the kind of things we view as non-normative influences, unusual events that have a major impact on individual lives because they disturb the expected pattern of the life cycle. And these are usually beyond the person's control. However, they can be positive and negative. So with positive, these may be rare opportunities for you to make some sort of an advancement, be it physical or mental. Or it can be a severe challenge. An accident holds you back from the usual developmental process. Now, there's another aspect to this. And this aspect is way totally different. Excuse me for moving my camera. The timing of influences. When do they occur? Where do they occur in the developmental process? You have to learn about something called critical or sensitive periods, and that's what I'm going to talk to you just for a few minutes about now, and then we'll be done. So let's begin with imprinting. The students, your classmates who come to class, who are not on or in the cohort that is in the in class sessions, heard about this the other day. Imprinting, what is that? It's instinct. It's an instinctive form of learning. What is it involved in? A young animal forming an attachment to the first moving object it sees. Unfortunately, if you weren't in class, you didn't get the discussion about attachment. You'll need to read about that. So attachment, what is attachment? It's an affectionate bond, but I'm not going to sit here and lecture you on that because it's a long lecture. You'll have to read about that. So an instinctive form of learning that during a critical period in early development involves a young animal, and I didn't say human, a young animal imprinting or bonding more or less with the first moving object it sees, usually the mother. Now, let me give you an experiment. Frank Lorenz, a British psychologist, did a lot of research on imprinting and bonding. And he did a study, he did an experiment where he took some duck eggs and he incubated them. And when they hatched, he made sure that he was the first moving object that they saw. And sure enough, they imprinted on Dr. Lorenz. And they followed him around for an extended period of time. I'm talking like weeks and months, because he did not allow an adult duck to come around his ducklings. And then he did, and then they left him behind and went over to the duck. So I guess he was mama/daddy duck for a number of months. That's imprinting. Human beings don't do that. We don't imprint on the first moving object we see at birth. Somewhat we do, but not to the extent of an animal. But we do have these two things going on. We have a critical period. We have critical periods in our lives, and we have sensitive periods in our lives. Critical periods. They're controversial. They're non-repeatable in some cases. Learning how to speak by a certain age. The experiment or the posit is that if you don't learn a language by the age of 4, you will never learn to speak a language. I'm talking about all languages. If you were isolated and you never learned to hear language or speak language by the age of 4, according to what this posit says, this postulate, it's even as strong as a hypothesis that and I misspoke, between the ages, excuse me, of birth and 12, or 2 and 12. If you haven't learned a language by the age of 12, you're not going to ever learn to speak a language. All languages. So nobody ever spoke to you until you're 12 years old. And in sensitive periods, it's when you are open to certain kinds of experiences in the developmental process, not necessarily as powerful as a critical period. Chomsky and Lindenberg, two of the researchers that did a lot of work here, and I'll let you read about them. Lindenberg and his language acquisition device, and Chomsky related to learning a language, and so on and so forth. They were the hot ticket in the 60s, and their hypothesis was if you don't learn by 12, no language will ever be spoken. Now, here's a suggestion for you, a strong suggestion. It's not an assignment, but I'd really, really like for you to have this experience, if you can even find this. Nova, back in early 70s, did a story, hour-long story, on Jeannie. And the title of it is Jeannie the Wild Child. Jeannie the Wild Child. And it's a story, it's a documentary of a girl who was found in LA who had been severely abused, not sexually, but severely abused, never allowed to speak, tied to a potty training chair in an isolated room in her home. And because her dad thought she was mentally challenged, and she wasn't. Well, that's still out there. We don't know for sure. And she never learned to speak. So if you are pretty powerful emotionally, this is still going to yank at your heartstrings because it's a very sad story. An hour long. So if you want to watch it, get some popcorn, sit down with a Coke, and watch that thing. I guarantee you it's going to change your view of certain things, including how research is done. Please watch that if you will. Take time out of your busy day for an hour, if you can even find the damn thing. It was up for a long, long, long time, and now there are versions of it, but it's hard to find the original hour-long version. If you can, you'll be happy that I told you to do it, although you will be sad when you finish watching it. So that's all I got for this lecture. It turned out to be a lot longer than I wanted it to be. I was looking at 6 or 7 minutes, but you know me, I get started on something. I can't shut up. I apologize. All right. See you next lecture.